There was supposed to be a debate tonight. Did you know that? But not anymore. ABC and CNN both canceled the Republican primary debates they had scheduled ahead of next Tuesday's primary in New Hampshire after Donald Trump and Nikki Haley declined to participate. Now, Trump also skipped the previous debates and nevertheless won Iowa with 51% of the vote. Nikki Haley has absolutely zero reason to do single combat with Ron DeSantis, who's way behind her in New Hampshire. The Granite State looks to be make or break for Haley's campaign. She's hoping independents will break for her. The latest tracking polls are not looking amazing. So, no more debates, no more drama. For once, a lack of drama might work to Trump's advantage. Jennifer Horn is the former chair of the New Hampshire Republican Party, who left the Republican Party in 2020. Brendan Buck served as counsel to Speaker Paul Ryan and Press Secretary Speaker John Boehner, and they both joined me now. Jennifer, let me start with you. As someone who knows New Hampshire politics, what is your read on how things are looking there as we are just a few days away from the primary?
Well, I would say that I don't see things going well for Nikki Haley. I think that dropping out of the debates was a big mistake, frankly. She seems to have forgotten that debates aren't supposed to be about the candidates, they're about the voters. And in New Hampshire, there's a strong sense of wanting maximum exposure to the candidates, getting maximum information from them. And she needed something big and bold and different in order to kind of make up that gap between her and Donald Trump. And she's just not doing it. Instead, what we're seeing are the numbers that came out yesterday, post-Iowa, actually have Trump higher. He's over 50% in at least two of them. And the gap between them is growing.
That's interesting. I mean, one of the things, Brendan, one of the things that sort of the question here is about independents who non-affiliated voters can vote in the New Hampshire primary. All the polling suggests those folks are much more amenable to Haley than Trump, but Republicans are much more amenable to Trump. This, of course, is not anything new. And New Hampshire has a wrinkle because there might be a lot of independent voters, but it's still, as DeSantis said, an uphill climb to win a Republican primary if you're not winning a majority of Republican voters.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You have to be a conservative to win the primary, and I think Nikki Haley is certainly a conservative. The problem is, though, that she has developed a bit of a reputation as being a never-Trumper at this point, and that's really working against her. And her unfavorables are way higher than you would like to see. It's the catch-22 that any of these Republicans had. You need to go after your opponent. Yes. You need to go after Donald Trump if you're going to take him down, and they've failed to do that. But if you do, like Chris Christie did, you become wildly unpopular with a lot of Republicans. So there's no real good, safe place to go. Now, ignoring him, I don't think was the right path. I think we'll look back and say that that was a big failure on all of their parts. But just to be clear, there was no easy way to beat Donald Trump. He was probably always going to be the nominee. But they clearly didn't bring any game-changing strategies that put that in question.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, I think you're right. Like to the degree that some sort of like taint of being a never-Trumper has sort of wafted over Nikki Haley, it's because she's running against Donald Trump and doing decently well, hence competing with him. And as a logical matter, that must be the case, right? Like this is the sort of inescapable bind, Jennifer, that everyone has found. And I mean, it's the reason that you left the Republican Party fundamentally. I think there's some question of like, oh, does the makeup of New Hampshire voters, like this is the St. Anselm poll just to show it. You know, among registered Republicans, Trump's up by 40 points, 65-25, DeSantis 8. Among undeclared, it's Haley 52, Trump 37, DeSantis 4. But again, it doesn't. You don't think there's going to be enough of those latter category in order to tip the balance?
No, absolutely not. You know, and it's interesting to me to hear the idea that Nikki Haley is being looked at as a never-Trumper and that's what's keeping her down. Nikki Haley served in his administration. Nikki Haley has already committed her vote to Donald Trump should he become the nominee. But I think that the issue here is less about Nikki Haley and more about Donald Trump. Donald Trump's support in the Republican Party has been unwavering for 8 years now. To Buck's point, there was never a chance that anyone other than Donald Trump was going to be the nominee. And Nikki Haley simply hasn't shown, I guess, the courage that is necessary to take on Trump in a way that would actually impact his support within the voter base. And in the primary, no matter what those undeclared voters do, in the end, as you just showed in the numbers, the Republicans overwhelmingly want Trump.
Brendan, to stay with this for a second, there was a moment where people, and again, we don't know what will happen on Tuesday. It's possible the voters surprise us. I was in New Hampshire in 2008 when everyone had written the obituary for Hillary Clinton's campaign, and it didn't work out that way. She won that primary that led to a very, very long extended primary fight between Barack Obama and her. So who knows? That said, there was a reason people did think they could dislodge him. Back after the 2022 midterms, there was a reason all those people got in the race. And his polling reflected it. Like, do you think, I guess the question is, like, how inevitable were things turning, or were there missed opportunities earlier on?
So I think that there's a couple of missed opportunities. One, I think it was a huge failure not to somehow draw him into any of the previous debates. He had no reason to debate, but they ignored him at the debates. They didn't try to use his ego against him in any way. But I think probably more than anything, there was really no appetite at any point for that. So, this was probably an uphill climb from the very beginning.
We'll see what happens on Tuesday. Jennifer Horn and Brendan Buck, thank you very much. Appreciate it.